Okay, let's talk about tools real quick. And these are the renovating tools that I've busted out because I've needed each and every one of them for the next door apartment renovation. This is a shithole, and this is not what I just finished. But I thought it's a unique opportunity. I normally like to be more polished, but believe it or not, but it's a unique opportunity to look at everything that it takes to get through not even a remodel, just a renovation, just a facelifting. Usually you have to take things apart, and you normally try to take things apart the way that they were put together. So to get into trim and stuff like that, to pop trim, baseboard, and moldings, and things like that off the wall, you want a nice trim bar. And you'll notice he's like a scraper. He's knife thin. He's got a nice sharp edge on him. It's not razor sharp. It's not even sharp like a knife, but I don't want to push it. And he's got a nice 90-degree edge with a bevel on him there, and a little loop to get some nails started. If you can get over the head of the nail, and you can drag it into the notch, and you can roll against the edge, and you can pop a nail up. But you can get behind this guy here, and then you just twist him, and that'll walk. You don't really want to do this too much, or you'll just unbend his bend, but you work to the 90. And you take your trims and things like that off. This will get you started because it has a nice sharp edge, it's nice and smooth, and it won't leave many marks if you run it correctly. And then once you're into that, and this is, once again, sometimes I'll be talking about things that you want to keep from destroying so you can put it back together. That's the case here. Sometimes with framing, you got to get a hold of a framing nail or a spike or something like that. You use a cat's paw, which is what this is. You notice it has cat's paw sort of esque shapes happening on it, little dish shapes. But that's so you can drive him down into wood to either side of a nail, get around the edge of it, and then drag its ass, rip and tear it right out of there. And actually, this being so short, people sometimes think it doesn't have a lot of power, but this will do you almost all the time. This and your hammer and a framing application. Or even in demolishing, if you get to a situation where you know there's a nail holding somebody together somewhere down in that hole or whatever, you can just start smashing and ripping with the cat's paw, which is sort of this here is low key, and it may appear as though it's sort of a fine tool. This is a blunt object. This is a blunt instrument. It's a weapon of mass destruction, this thing here, but it's highly effective. And I normally have him in the belt loop of my tool rig, so it's always on my hip there if I need it. So these two things do very similar tasks, but you don't want to have this in your hand if you're working with anything you want to keep from destroying or in fine finishing, and vice versa. This here won't do you any good in framing application. Hammers, obviously, you got grandma's junk drawer hammer, 16 ounce or 20 ounce, short little homeowners around the house. You don't want to get hit with it. You don't want to smash your finger with it. It hurts like a motherfucker. That being said, you want a framer, 22 ounce, 24, you can get a 28, they'll tire you out. The young guys like to look tough. This one has a little magnet here that'll hold a nail out there straight, and that's because if you're on a roof or you're on the eaves and you're framing in snowy weather and you got to have a nail right up there, and you could just take it up there and pink, and you get him started up there to a certain extent, and then you can reach up and beat him down in there if you're talented with a hammer, and you don't have to get up there far enough to hold with two hands a nail and the hammer to get it started. That's the idea here. So, hammer. Now, selection of bigger bars. So when you get to a point where this cat's paw isn't doing you, this is sort of for surgically removing fasteners. If you know where they are, you can sort of separate some lumber to a certain extent, but then you start needing leverage power. This will drag a nail out along its axis directly, but it's not going to start breaking and prizing things apart. It's basic lever technology. He's about half as long as this fella. And this here is when you're really looking for leverage. You can go a lot bigger than this, but that's sort of like a Burke bar or something, like Essential Craftsman. He likes his Burke bar. They have their applications, absolutely. But this is a bread and butter demolishing tool. It's mostly for leverage. It has the same sort of rear end on it that a hammer has. It's just longer, and by a factor of almost 2. It doesn't seem that much longer. It seems sort of hammer-esque in size, but you're getting up to nearly twice as long. You're getting up to nearly twice the leverage. And I just have another one right here, but I have one that I use more often because it's more balanced. It's less wang-dangly. It is longer than the hammer, and certainly you use a hammer and a pry bar together, one in each hand as you go. So to have one that does the task that the other one does, but isn't nearly as heavy or as long because it doesn't need to be, is when I grab this guy, and he has a slightly different orientation. Again, teardrop loop to get over nail heads and things like that. Slightly sharper. He does get in to tight little spots. He's easier to drive in than the end of this fella here, which is, you know, considerably more dull. Then you got other hammers that you don't want to leave a mark. If you want to beat lumber around to a certain position, or you want to pack in studs and slide them along, you want big surface areas so you're not leaving marks on it. Nobody likes to see there, even if it's framing, nobody wants to see a bunch of little hammer head marks on it. Kids and dirtbags alike just beat the lumber around to get it all into position and leave 1,000 little circle marks on it. No bueno. No bueno. Actually, I had a friend that his house had a loft that came out into the great room, and a big softwood post came up through the corner of the loft and went up to the ridge, and that was all decorative. And they were moving it into position on something like that. If you move that into position with an ordinary hammer, you'll mark it all up forevermore. Or somebody who's real savvy will say, well, you can do that, and then you can moisten it with a wet paper towel and iron it, and sometimes you get those marks to puff up and out. Yeah, you can do that if somebody fucks you. But the best thing to do is to just from the get-go use a hammer with a nice big surface area, nice soft material. This is a dead blow. It's got shot in there, lead shot or sand a lot of times, and it just kills the reverb, or it kills the bounce. So when you strike a blow, it goes pow and just lands and takes all of the energy to the task. Typical mallet. I was packing down the clip together vinyl flooring with this guy. He does leave marks, so because it's natural black rubber. So you don't want to be working with baseboard and stuff. You end up with a creature of this sort. These are the types of tools you can get at Harbor Freight. You may notice I like really high-end tools, or quite high-end tools. But dummy instruments like this, you could go more expensive. They may last you a little bit longer. I take care of these, but this is just Pittsburgh brand. You can go get your mallets and your clubs and your bars and your pry bars. Where's the one with the, some people like one with a handle on there. If you're going to always be doing the same task with this, taking up floorboards or something all day, this is more comfortable position for your hand, and it fills your palm better with a grip on it, rather than choking down on that little guy. By the middle of the day when you're eating your lunch, you have sort of a bruise. You can feel the inside of your hand hurts. So that's sort of where that will get you. When it won't give it up, when you're taking things apart, you're trying to clear out what you're not going to use, and it's not coming apart quick enough for you, enter Sawzall, reciprocating saw. It's just not a fine tool in the least. It's just mostly like used as lightsaber, basically, is what this is for. It does matter, that it oscillates like this. It's basically like a Superman with an ordinary carpenter's saw. But you can put various blades in there, and you can do various tasks. You can put scrapers and peel up linoleum tile with it. You can put a scrubber in there and scrub out the grout in between two tiles with it. You can put flexible, and you've seen me in other videos use these, but this is like a fillet knife. But this will take, this, because it's so flexible and because it's so thin, will float in between two tightly nailed together pieces of wood and basically slice the nails all off in there without getting sucked into migrating over into the lumber and cutting it off into the lumber unnecessarily, which is a pain in the ass. So that's the sort of the nature of that. Hacksaw blades, fairly thin hacksaw blades for simply cutting metal or plastic, PVC pipe. But you notice this guy is pretty thick. He'll cut structural steel. He is carbide, so you can cut screws and stuff off as well. But not to mention the hardness factor, he'll just cut through thick, meaty metal. Channel, I-beam, big half-inch bolts if you come across them, if you're really getting into a situation and you've had enough. In fact, I cut the alternator. It was an aluminum bracket, but I cut an aluminum bracket off the engine in my work truck with a blade like that. And, then again, it's not a fine finishing tool. It's not a fine woodworking tool. So all the wood cutting blades I have look like tree saws. And they're nail leader blades. They've been treated so that they'll cut mild steel right off. There's no reason to have simply wood cutting blades in renovating, for sure, because there's almost always a fastener in there that'll destroy a wood cutting blade. So all my blades for wood will cut right through a nail, no problemo. And the other thing is a different form factor. This is a pistol grip, and actually, I've been using him left, right, and center lately, and he's done almost all the tasks that I needed him to do. More comfortable and, again, more balanced, but when I really need to get serious, or I need to cut all the way along the bottom of a wall or something like that, it's time to get the big guns, and we go with the full-size reciprocating saw. So that's how we get things taken apart around here. Sledgehammers, you know, you see a lot of people promote demolition and like the home shows and shit like that, and somebody puts a sledgehammer through the wall in a big piece or a big hole in it. Yeah, that's cool for TV or the movies, but you don't want to make a bunch of pieces when you're demolishing things. So we try to undo things the way that they were put together, take a whole sheet of drywall off, fold it into quarters or something, and move it out of here, and just pop it all off and be intelligent about it. It saves energy. You won't be sweating and puffing so badly and burning so many calories, because well, that isn't bad in and of itself, but you're going to be at this all day, so you want to be smart. One of the last things I'll mention is, well, let's move on to another video. After now we're done with demolishing, we're going to go on to something else.